What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of Pistons Daily, where you can find daily content covering all things Detroit Pistons, Monday through Friday. As always, I'm your host. My name is Kyle Garrison. I'm over on Twitter at Kyle Garrison2, where I talk all things Detroit sports. So head over there, give me comments, questions, concerns, episode ideas. I'd love to hear from all you guys. Also, shout out to everyone who tunes in every single day. We are on the road to 2,000 subscribers, so if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way to help support the channel. And with that being said, let's jump into a Friday edition of Pistons Daily. So first thing that I wanted to talk about before we get into our skill of the day is Greg Swartz over at Bleacher Report released an article basically just grading every team's NBA title chances. And I'm just going to go through Tier A and Tier B. Tier A is the top title contenders. These teams should expect to win the 2026 championship. Tier B, playoff locks, but one small trade away or need a little internal development to win a title. And the teams in Tier A are the Cavs, Knicks, Nuggets, Rockets, Thunder. And the teams in Tier B are Magic, Spurs, Timberwolves, Lakers, Clippers, Warriors, Hawks, and the Pistons. And I won't touch on the other tiers because they're all kind of irrelevant. These are just the main 12 teams that have a really, really solid shot of potentially winning an NBA championship this year. And one team that I think in Tier B you could move into Tier A would be the Timberwolves. Back-to-back conference finals appearances. Anthony Edwards is such a young and up-and-coming player. They still have Nasri, Julius Randle, Rudy Gobert, and a lot of their veteran pieces that they've surrounded around Anthony Edwards. So I do think that they're a team that could potentially be a championship contender. We've seen the past 2 years they got beat by the Mavericks, they got beat by the Thunder, and I think this might be the year that they can kind of get over that hump, and Anthony Edwards really takes that next step into stardom. But again, we'll have to see. I just do think that Tier A probably is where I would see the Timberwolves. But other than that, and the teams in Tier B, I think are all pretty fair. You've got your Pistons, the Hawks, and the Magic in the East. And then the Spurs, Lakers, Clippers, Warriors are all going to be solid teams this year. But the good thing is when you look at a lot of these teams outside of the Magic, they're all pretty old. They're all, have their best players in their prime or past their prime, like the Clippers, like the Warriors. And then you're looking at the Spurs who, they're a really interesting team. What are they going to look like overall with that squad? Are they going to have guys that mesh around Victor Wembanyama, or is everyone going to be fighting for shots? Is De'Aaron Fox and Dylan Harper and Stephon Castle, is that going to work as a three-man backcourt where none of those guys really can play small forward? So there's a lot of different moving pieces with that team. But I like the fact that the Pistons are in this tier. Other NBA media members and beat writers are high on the Pistons as well, and they think that they're, one move or just some internal development away from actually competing for an NBA title. I think it's very encouraging going forward. And I think there is some holes, definitely, that they have to fix. I don't know if internal development is going to get them to where they want to be. It's going to help, but they might need to go out and you might need to solidify that starting power forward, or you might need to solidify that starting shooting guard next to Cade Cunningham if Jaden Ivey doesn't pan out. So there's a lot of different things that this team has to evaluate going forward. And I'm not saying that Jaden Ivey is some terrible player and he can't be a number 2 option on a championship team. I think he has that type of potential. But again, we're just going to have to see what he looks like coming off of a pretty serious injury last year. He missed significant time, and there's just a lot of question marks surrounding whether or not he can be that guy next to Cade. So if the Pistons want to kind of creep into that Tier A, I do think they need a legitimate long-term stretch floor spacing option in the starting lineup. And with Asar, Tobias, and JD rounding out your front court as starters, there's going to be a lack of spacing, and they're going to have to evaluate that, because if you're halfway through the year and you're just not getting consistent productivity from Tobias outside of the arc, then you're looking at 3 players who are basically non-shooters. And again, we don't know if Jaden Ivey is going to be able to shoot 40% from 3 again last year. So this starting lineup could have a very, very big hole when it comes to just 3-point shooting and having a high volume shooter. So if you can bring in a good stretch 4 who can shoot 38% from 3, maybe that's a direction the Pistons want to go in. If they think, hey man, we can go out right now and win the Eastern Conference as soon as this year, Maybe we see a deadline move. Maybe we see something like that where they do kind of buy high on a player, and hopefully they don't have to give up too much draft capital or too much long-term assets, and still get a quality player that you can kind of plug in for Tobias Harris. Maybe you relegate him to the bench. You allow Ron Holland to kind of take over that backup small forward, power forward position where he's just kind of a Swiss Army knife that comes off the bench. There's a lot of different options that this team could go in, but you are kind of handcuffed right now with the lack of spacing, having Tobias, JD, and Asar all in the starting lineup this year. But let me know in the comments down below if you think the Pistons are a move away from being considered a championship contender, and what that move might be, what you would like to see the front office do, and just what direction you'd like to see them go in. But moving on, this is where we'll do our skill of the day. The reason that I wanted to move the skill of the day to second today is because I want to talk about Duncan Robinson's impact on floor spacing. And I know I just went on a rant about how the Pistons have a very big hole in the floor spacing. That's more specifically the starting lineup. I think that a guy like Duncan Robinson is going to provide some very, very solid rotational shooting. He's going to be a guy that can be a microwave scorer off the bench like you kind of had with Malik Beasley last year. And I don't know if he's going to have the similar season to Malik. I'm almost guaranteeing that he doesn't make 316 threes. But if he can still come in, make 200 plus three-pointers off of the bench, be a good floor spacing option if you absolutely need to have him end games or close out quarters, you can have that. And it'll provide so much spacing because when you saw his time in Miami, especially, the early years, and then there was a couple year gap where his efficiency wasn't great, but last year he was excellent as well. He could very well come in and just kind of increase his production overall, because it's not like Malik Beasley was a guy who was shooting consistent 40% from three every single year and playing 70 plus games. There was a lot of times in his career where he was not playing full seasons, he was not shooting 40% from three, and it wasn't on the volume that he was on last year. I mean, he had the most three-point attempts of his career per game last year at 9.3, and he shot 41.6%. I don't even think that Malik Beasley was going to replicate that, and nor do I think that Duncan Robinson is going to replicate that. But I think that he could have a similar impact, and with the facilitators around him coming off of the bench with Karras and Jaden Ivey potentially running that unit off the bench, or well, not off the bench, but in that second unit when in the non-Cade minutes. And then when you do have Cade and Duncan Robinson together, I think they can feed off of each other. You have Asar and Ron, who I think are going to be looked at as players who could potentially be ball handlers going forward at that wing position. So there's a lot to like in just the overall facilitation around a guy like Duncan Robinson. It's just going to be a matter of if he's able to get up shots consistently, if the other team is not entirely focused on him and his movement off ball. It's going to create some spacing. He's going to be able to get up clean looks very often, just like I said, with the ability for all of the guys I mentioned to get downhill and kind of collapse the defense. He's going to find open spots, and I'm really excited to see what he can do this year. And when you're looking just not overall at his efficiency, but just his impact on spacing, like I mentioned, an impact on the team frequency, when Duncan was on the floor, the Heat's effective field goal percentage increased by 1.4%, which is in the 77th percentile amongst wings, which is very, very good to see. But overall, the team's shot frequency from three-point range increased so much when he was on the floor. Obviously, that has a lot to do with the fact that he's a great shooter and he puts up a lot of shots. But I also think, like I mentioned, with his ability to attract attention off ball and his movement, it allows other players to get open. It allows them to get cleaner looks. And I think that's going to benefit the Pistons this year. Last year, when Duncan was on the floor, the Heat shot 0.7% more corner threes, and then 3% more threes above the break, which totaled to 3.7 more overall threes. 3.7% more overall threes when Duncan was on the floor, which was in the 86th percentile amongst qualified wings. And when you're looking at this Pistons team, like I mentioned just a few minutes ago, they need high-volume, knockdown three-point shooters, but they also need someone who's going to come in and he's going to help the floor spacing, he's going to draw off-ball attention, and he's really going to allow the Pistons' explosive athletes to have more space and more room when they're driving to the rim. But let me know in the comments if you think Duncan is a good alternative to Malik Beasley, or if you would have liked to see the Pistons front office add somebody else or go in a different direction to try and replace Malik Beasley's production from last year. But moving on into another topic, Zach Harper, I've been doing his top 40 players at every position. I've been diving into that, with Asar Thompson and Tobias Harris. And I kind of skipped over his center rankings, which was, a few weeks ago. And I just wanted to touch on that. He has Jalen Duren ranked at 23, and guys ahead of him that I think that Jalen Duren, as soon as this year can pass, are Nick Claxton, Naz Reid, Jakob Poeltl, Nikola Vucevic, Daniel Gafford, Miles Turner, and Jared Allen. And again, the jury is still out on Jalen Duren. Last year we did see him become an elite lob threat, a double-double machine. He shot his best efficiency from the field at 69% of his entire career. He averaged the most offensive rebounds per game at 3.6. He's also 21 years old, so there's a lot to like from what we saw in the development of Jalen Duren's game last year. And there's also a lot to like in the fact that he thrives next to specific Pistons players. When he's with Asar, he's great defensively. And when he's with Cade Cunningham, he's great offensively. And again, a lot of people will say, well, are his skills only predicated around on who's around him? Who cares? If Asar Thompson and Cade Cunningham are, I think, the Pistons' two most key pieces going forward for them to get to a championship level team, they're not going to get rid of them anytime soon. So having Jalen Duren long-term alongside Asar and Cade is a recipe for success. We saw it last year. He thrived next to Asar defensively, and he thrived next to Cade offensively. So I think there's just a ton to like about Jalen Duren's game. He's also a great passer at 6'11", and that's just another positive attribute that he brings to the table. So again, with a extension on the table, there's going to be some areas of Jalen Duren's game that he's going to want to show off this year. And I think that you could see him above a Nick Claxton, a Jakob Poeltl, Nikola Vucevic, and Daniel Gafford as soon as next year. And he hops up into that Jared Allen, that Naz Reid, Miles Turner tier of very good two-way centers. Obviously, he's not going to give the three-point shooting upside as a guy like Naz Reid or a guy like Nikola Vucevic or Miles Turner, but he can be somebody like Jared Allen, who's a great rim running big. He gets his buckets when he needs to. He shoots efficiently around the rim. The defensive energy and the defensive impact is going to have to improve if he wants to be on that Jared Allen level. But I do think that will come with time because, again, I've mentioned it a million times. He's 21 years old. He has so much room for growth. There's so much room for him to improve on those different areas of the game that we want him to get better at. And I just know this offseason he worked on a lot of those things, and we're going to see a different JD this year. Again, it's a contract year for him. He's got an extension on the table. It could be $20 million. It could be $30 million. It's just going to depend on how he plays this year. But again, I do think JD will vault himself into the top 20 as soon as this year, with some room to break into that top 15. And we're going to be talking about him amongst the tiers of, like I mentioned, a guy like Jared Allen. Or if you're looking even a little bit higher, somebody like Kristaps Porzingis or Isaiah Hartenstein, or some of those really solid, almost all-star fringe centers in the NBA. But let me know in the comments if you think JD is the 23rd best center in the league, or if you don't agree, just where you see him ranked amongst NBA big men. Before we wrap up the show, I know yesterday I kind of talked about how I wanted to just touch on different news around the NBA and not just go so specific to the Pistons because the offseason is long and we're about a month away from the regular season and training camp getting started. So I just wanted to touch on some different things going on around the NBA. And yesterday, it was reported that Kawhi Leonard is now under investigation for basically the Clippers and the owner of the Clippers, Steve Ballmer, circumventing the NBA salary cap by paying Kawhi $28 million over 4 years for a no-show job with the company called Aspiration that is now filed for bankruptcy. And this is just an absolutely unbelievable scenario. Steve Ballmer was a lead investor in this random company through his own LLC. And he was partnering with this company. He was doing sponsorships with the Clippers for this company, basically funding them. So 9 months after Kawhi signed his 4-year, $176 million deal, I believe in 2021, the he agreed to a 4-year, $28 million endorsement deal with this company, Aspire. And this was basically to circumvent the NBA salary cap, the restrictions on it, and allow him to get paid more. And I'm just really talking about what I've read and what I've saw, and I don't want to speculate too much. And, if I'm wrong here, correct me, because the situation is absolutely bizarre, and there's so many different articles with different information. But I just chose to use the ESPN article for my information from Baxter Holmes that he put out yesterday. So if you haven't already checked that out, it gives a very good in-depth just analysis of what's going on with Kawhi Leonard. But what I've gathered from it is that Aspiration is now completely bankrupt. They have been investigated for all sorts of fraudulent activity as well. They've had different employees that have come out and filed for bankruptcy and are under investigation for fraud. And it's just an absolute mess, this company is. And obviously, the Clippers organization is saying that it is not illegal for players to have endorsement deals, but it is for Steve Ballmer to go out and fund this company so they can pay Kawhi the 4-year, $28 million deal or whatever to add on to his already 4-year, $176 million contract he was originally on. So I really have no idea what the result of this investigation will be, whether it'll be a slap on the wrist or they actually will be reprimanded. Who knows with the NBA? It's a very, very interesting league with a lot of different moving parts in it and people who make these decisions. But what I do know is that with Malik Beasley, we can always look at that situation and think it could be worse. The front office could have been involved in it. There could be a scandal with the Pistons organization, and there's not. The Pistons are not involved in the investigation whatsoever. Nobody is questioning Tom Gores or Trajan Langdon or anybody in that front office. And the overall integrity of this franchise is not in question. But for the Clippers, the integrity of their organization is definitely in question right now. Steve Ballmer has always been a little bit shady, trying to bend the rules to his advantage. And it clearly hasn't worked out for him, not only because he's under investigation now, but the Clippers haven't made it out of the first round in 3 years and have absolutely no direction that they're going in right now. James Harden, Kawhi are old, and they're not getting any younger. They brought in Chris Paul and John Collins and have just made some really weird moves throughout the past couple of years. They're not going to win a championship. I promise you that they won't win a championship with Kawhi and James Harden. They're going to have to rebuild eventually, but this news coming out makes things much more difficult, much more complicated for them. And again, it just puts into perspective that the Pistons do a great job if they follow league protocol. And even when a situation arises like with the one with Malik Beasley, they don't complain about someone releasing the information 24 hours. They don't make a big deal about it. They move on. They adjust accordingly. And, I just think they do a great job of not allowing those type of situations to affect them. Obviously, they've never had a gambling investigation, but in the first time that I've seen that through the Pistons organization, it's gone very, very well. They've complied with the league. And hopefully they'll be able to get Malik Beasley back and it won't affect them too much. But again, they're not under investigation. Their integrity is not questioned. They're scot-free. They've separated themselves from the Malik Beasley situation. And if everything goes well for Malik, they'll come back and hopefully they'll re-sign him. But you've got the Clippers organization. You've got Steve Ballmer. You've got now Kawhi Leonard. All of these people involved are now being questioned. And it's just not a great look overall, in my opinion. But again, let me know your thoughts, your initial thoughts on the Kawhi investigation, if you think anything will come of it, or if it, like I mentioned, will just be a slap on the wrist. Again, I don't want to go too much into it, and I don't want to speculate or whatnot. But this is just a very interesting spot for this to happen, a month before training camp starts. So we'll see how that develops, and I'll probably continue to update if there is any big developments with that situation. But that's really all I've got for you guys today on a Friday edition of Pistons Daily. Let me know if you guys like me diving into just news around the NBA, or if you'd like me to just stick with the Pistons and continue on that track as we head into training camp. But as always, like, subscribe, comment, turn on post notifications, and follow me on Twitter at Kyle Garrison2. Also, head over to Spotify, leave a 5-star review and a follow if you can. That would be greatly appreciated. Once again, thank you all so much for tuning in every single day. With that being said, that is going to do it here for episode 58 of Pistons Daily, and I will catch you all next time.